Welcome back to the FITSNews studios, another edition of your Week in Review. I'm Will Folks, the founding editor of FITSNews. I'm your host for the show. We have got a ton to cover. First, a big true crime block with Jen Wood, our research director. We're going to update you on the latest on a big trial that's scheduled for this month, but also a new potential murder mystery out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. We're going to walk you through a case that's making headlines across the country and the globe. Huge story. After that, I'm going to sit down with Andy Fancher about the latest law enforcement corruption up in Lawrence County, South Carolina. Andy's been knocking heads all over the state, holding police agencies accountable. We're going to walk you through the latest on not only a scandal up there in Lawrence County, but an apparent cover-up trying to keep information from getting out to the public. Finally, I'm going to sit down with our Dylan Nolan to recap all the big political news in South Carolina this past week, starting with a big congressional forum up in the Palmetto upstate between embattled incumbent William Timmons and his challenger Adam Morgan. We're also going to walk you through motion and a lack of motion on some hot button bills at the South Carolina State House. All that and more heading your way on the Week in Review. All right, so joined by Jen Wood for our first segment here, and Jen Wood actually is going to be in South Carolina later this month for the Kuhchi retrial, the big case out of Summerville, South Carolina. Actually, Jen, before we dive into some of these new cases, let's get into Kuhchi a little bit. Is there anything you can tell us about that case as it heads to trial?
You know, the more I research this case, the more fascinating it is to me. It'll be very interesting to watch this as on the second go round, just seeing how the prosecution, if there's any new information that comes out, who they're using as expert witnesses, because the case is not, it's not open and shut. It is built entirely on circumstantial evidence, just like the Murdaugh case. So, yeah, I mean, I think there a bunch of new motions were filed by the defense this week that we are getting a hold of, just to go over, what's happening leading into the trial. But yeah, I think it's going to be an absolutely fascinating trial.
Again, Michael Kuhchi, the jeweler there in Summerville, South Carolina, accused of killing his 38-year-old wife, Sarah Lynn Kuhchi. Michael Kuhchi claims that she killed herself tripping and falling into a garden hose. Apparently, it's a bizarre story. Again, everyone, I think, going into it thought this guy was going to get convicted of murder, but it turned out at the end of the first trial, Jen, it wasn't a question of murder. It was a question of not guilty or manslaughter. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The jury was divided and they couldn't come to a consensus. So it was a mistrial. And, the alleged murder occurred 9 years ago. So it has been a long time. They did the first trial and, knew they had to do a second trial. But COVID came up, so it really put delays on it, on the docket. So it is 9 years later. So,
well,
yeah.
Can't wait to get you here to cover it. You did an amazing report on how the Murdaugh case, you mentioned it earlier, how that circumstantial case could impact both favorably for the prosecution and potentially for the defense, given some issues there with some of the cast of characters, particularly the lead investigator in this case, who made a name for himself in the Murdaugh case, not in the best way, as it turned out. But again, the state's successful, obviously, in securing convictions against Alec Murdaugh. We'll see if they are successful the second time around for Michael Kuhchi. But Jen, as we mentioned in the lead to the show, there are some big cases that we are following. And I want to start with one before we get to the really big case that has just gone viral across the country. Actually, the Daily Mail had a huge story on it, this case out of Horry County and the pastor's wife. First, let's talk about the case that you've been covering down in Bamberg, a missing persons case involving a woman that we think there could be a resolution coming. But Jen, walk us through the case of Megan Bodford down in Bamberg County.
So 25-year-old Megan Bodford, she's the mother of three, cute woman. Last week on Thursday, April 25th, she sent a very ominous text to a friend that said, if you don't hear from me in 30 minutes, I'm dead. He has a gun. And friends had been increasingly worried about her volatile relationship with the father of her infant daughter and, had been reporting things to law enforcement, trying to get help. And this text was kind of, it was not, I don't think it was surprising to them, but it was very sad. And unfortunately, the friend didn't call the police until the next day to report this text. They went out to do a welfare check on Saturday. And given the boyfriend's history of domestic violence, he has a lengthy criminal history, including pending charges. They called in the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division to aid them in serving a warrant on the boyfriend. And he was apprehended Saturday morning.
So
And
boyfriend's captured, and the
yes,
baby's okay. The
and
4-month-old.
the baby. There were concerns about the 4-month-old child, and that baby was found safe and sound. I believe on Sunday, but on early this week, they found, they'd still been searching for, even though they had the boyfriend in custody, they had no clue where Megan was. So, SLED, Bamberg County Sheriff's Office, DNR, they were doing ongoing searches, for her. And unfortunately, they did find a burned out vehicle about 1.5 miles away from his residence, where she was last known to be with the remains of somebody in it. They have not confirmed that it is Megan Bodford, but, her friends and family are, well, they had some hope. They believe that it is likely her.
Oh, wow. Unbelievable. And Jen, I wanted to point out, you had mentioned earlier about the friend who had waited until the following day. A lot of people watching this might say, what was she thinking? What were they thinking? But it's important to point out, you did a great report on this, that her friends had been reaching out to law enforcement, to this, what's the
probation.
But what's the guy's? Yeah,
Jarrett Davis.
They'd been reaching out to this guy's probation officer repeatedly sounding the alarm, raising concerns for Megan Bodford's safety. So again, people would hear that and they think, well, they should have done something immediately. Well, they had been doing a lot of this for weeks.
Yeah, and Megan herself, I haven't obtained these reports yet, but I do have requests in for them. Megan herself had called the police to report domestic violence, and allegedly, and her friend said that every time that they came out, Jarrett would run out into the woods and they walked away without pressing charges, apprehending him. So she had tried. Her friend said that she really believed she had just given up at towards the end. But, the text, she sent me the images images of the text that she had sent to the probation officer. And she flat out, she was sending images of Megan with, bruises and very clear signs of domestic violence, saying he is going to kill her. I am worried about her. I'm worried about the baby. And they said, call the law enforcement. The friend said, we have tried that. It is not working. He is on probation. He's violating his probation. We need help. It's unknown right now if they did anything, but based on the text messages that I saw, it didn't appear as any action was taken.
Unbelievable. Well, Jen, you've done amazing work digging on this story. Obviously, no identification yet of the body found in that charred vehicle. As of this filming, this remains a missing persons investigation led by the Bamberg County Sheriff's Department, with the investigation into that charred out vehicle being led by the State Law Enforcement Division. So obviously we're going to keep track of both of those inquiries. And Jen, as you mentioned earlier, the individual who clearly linked to this in some form or fashion, he's not been charged yet, but is incarcerated, was picked up on those outstanding domestic violence warrants. So Jen, amazing work on this story. I want to now get into this story that has sort of overtaken, I know, your work for the past 24 or 48 hours since we first broke this story out of Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. This is the story of Micah Miller. She is the wife of J.P. Miller, who is the pastor of Solid Rocket Market Common. Is that the name of the church there in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina?
Yeah.
By all accounts, if you read the obituary that Pastor Miller wrote for his late wife, it sounds like everything was hunky-dory. She was repeatedly praising him as the best pastor, the funniest pastor. He praised her work with him at the church. But Jen, behind closed doors, out of the view of the public, although increasingly in the view of those who followed Micah Miller on social media, a different narrative is emerging, wasn't it?
A very different narrative. And, that obituary said a lot of things, and like a lot of things we see online, didn't address, anything behind that was going on behind the scenes. What it did not mention was that Micah Miller had filed for divorce 2 weeks prior to her death. And according to our sources, those papers were served to Pastor J.P. Miller Thursday, 2 days prior to her death.
Oh, wow. And then we've also got, I think this is the clip that's really gone viral. We put it up on our YouTube page earlier this week, but let's cut to this clip. This is what really just sent shivers up and down my spine, is listening to the way that Pastor Miller announced this. Let's cut real quick to this clip of Pastor J.P. Miller announcing the death of his late wife.
We're not going to do an altar call today. Instead, I'm going to have you stand up, and I'm going to make an announcement. And after the announcement, I'm going to ask that you leave church quietly and don't talk about the announcement here in the building, please, if you can. So y'all can stand to your feet. I'm taking a little bit of a break, and I don't want to have to worry about the church. My break may be a few days, a few weeks, I don't know. I got a call late last night. My wife has passed away. And it was self-induced, and it was up in North Carolina. And we're going to have a funeral for her next Sunday here at 3 p.m. And so it's all I can, I'm just kind of going on adrenaline right now. So y'all pray for me and my kids and everybody. And y'all knew that she wasn't well mentally, and that she needed her medicine that was hard to get to her.
Jen, how bizarre is that? He's asking people, don't talk about this. What the heck is up with this clip?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a number of her friends, many who are former or current members of the congregation. I think if they're current, they're about to become former. And they said, he spent the entire sermon just, yucking it up, nothing was different. And then he drops that announcement at the end. One individual said to me, any normal person, it seems as though they would get somebody to do that in their place. Like they wouldn't even be able to function. And yet there he was standing in front of his congregation and just drops that at the end. It was so bizarre.
We've had a lot of feedback on that particular clip, but there's one other clip I wanted to play real quick, because nothing I've seen at this point online has Micah Miller or specifically indicating abuse perpetrated at the hands of her husband. But there is a clip that we found that I wanted to play real quick that features her discussing the issue of abused spouses. Let's cut to this clip real quick. Here's Micah Miller discussing her situation just days before her death.
You are the bride of Christ. Before anybody else's bride, male or female, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what gender you are. Abuse is abuse. And you are the bride of Christ. And my Bible says that he took all the abuse you could think of for you so that you didn't have to live that life of slavery and bondage and pain.
All right, Jen, you've covered stories like this. What do you see when you watch that clip of Micah Miller addressing the issues in her life?
What I don't see is someone who looks to be potentially suicidal. And that is what one of her friends said. Her videos leading up to her death were typical Micah. I think it looked like somebody who was seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, who was getting free of whatever situation she was in. And one friend said that's what really bothers her, is that this allegation of her death being suicide doesn't track with what she knows about Micah, what she knows about her state of mind prior to her death.
Yeah, I don't watch that and see someone who's suicidal. I see somebody who has made peace with their God about this situation. In fact, it's interesting she makes that appeal to other women, because in so many of these settings, Jen, these pastors, these church figures, they tell the women, "Oh, well, God would be mad at you if you leave me, even though I'm, beating you, gaslighting you, whatever the heck they're doing." She has taken a firm stand on that. So credit to her there with that message of empowerment. And boy, now that we know what happened, certainly that message rings even truer. Jen, let's talk about what happened. Who is leading this investigation? What do we know so far about the investigation into Micah Miller's death?
So her death occurred in Lumberton, North Carolina. Apparently, she did not show up to work. I don't know the circumstances as to how she was found, but her friends told me that she has absolutely no ties to that area. There's no vacation property or, secondary home. There's just no reason for her to have been up in that area. So they're questioning even the area that she was in, why she was there. I've heard, a number, as things blow up on social media, you start seeing rumors, what I've heard that. I did speak with a source who indicated that they were very heavily investigating the circumstances of her death. It was a gunshot wound. I do feel confident in saying that, but right now, we haven't confirmed one. I've seen one rumor that it was a gunshot wound to the back of the head. I have heard that somebody heard multiple shots fired. I have not gotten confirmation of that, but we have got so many FOIAs in on this case because, even the history of Pastor Miller's family is, and Pastor Miller and his family, I think it's going to people are going to find it very interesting.
Well, and that's the other part of this story that we're investigating. Obviously, you've pulled a host of prior issues involving the father of J.P. Miller. Jen, real quickly, walk us through a few of those. What's one of the big ones that came up in your research? So
in 2015, J.P. Miller's father was also a pastor. He was a very well-known Jerry Falwell type pastor. In South Carolina. And in 2015, he was federally indicted on charges of using, they have a college called it's a Bible college. I can't remember the exact name, but using international students who are here on visas as slave labor.
Wow.
And he pled guilty to that charge. So it's not even an allegation. He pled guilty to that charge and served time in federal prison. And individuals are indicating to me that I need to look into that because they don't believe that practice is necessarily stopped. I haven't found that yet because, like I said, I'm in the initial stages of doing my deep dive into the people in this case. But it absolutely was a very concerning case and right out of Florence.
Yeah, this has been one of those stories, just the second after it broke on social and our tip line, emails bombarding us with information related to this case and some of the allegations. Jen, cannot thank you enough for helping us sift through rumor to get to fact. And so that we can find the truth about what happened to Micah Miller, not only her suspicious death up in Lumberton, North Carolina, but again, all these threads associated with it and with this church. And again, Jen, you're also digging into the church itself too, is that correct?
Oh yeah. And what struck me the most about, this was, it was a sad, sometimes you have weeks that the stories that you cover are sad. And this was one of them, just the similarities between Micah Miller and Megan Bodford. They were from very different worlds, but they were, Micah's 30, Megan's 25, and from what I can tell, they were actively looking for help to get out of a very bad situation. And it's hard to cover stories like these when you're starting to see things that indicate, what happened could have been preventable. So, I'm hoping to, get information and help educate people and hopefully eventually affect changes in how these situations are handled.
Indeed. And as we tape this tomorrow, the funeral for Micah Miller has been scheduled there at the church in Myrtle Beach, and certainly no idea what's going to happen there based on everything we've seen. There's clearly multiple narratives emerging about this case. There's the narrative that her widower, I guess we call him now, JP wants to spread to the local media there. He's given an interview where he, of course, plays the mourning husband, and maybe he is. We don't know yet. We don't know. We're going to dig on this. We're going to go where the facts take us. But Jen, can't thank you enough for your work on this story as we dive into the mystery of Micah Miller.
Shortly after filming the Week in Review, we received a tragic update to the story of Megan Bodford following a grim discovery of a body in a burned-out car earlier this week. A press release by the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division shortly before 2 p.m. on Friday confirmed the worst fears of Bodford's friends and family. 28-year-old Jarrett Haskell Davis of Denmark, South Carolina, was charged with murder, possession of a weapon during a violent crime, felon in possession of a firearm, arson, and desecrating human remains. According to a probable cause affidavit accompanying warrants for his arrest, Davis, quote, shot and murdered Bodford on April 25, 2024 in the Jens Branch Road area of Denmark.
So one of my favorite parts about this job is working with people who, like me, don't really care who they piss off. And Andy, I got to tell you, man, if it wasn't clear enough from a couple shows ago, you fit in perfectly with this MO here at FITSNews, and you have been a one-man wrecking crew when it comes to exposing corruption in law enforcement in the state, particularly in Lawrence County, South Carolina. Now, we've got a story this week that I think takes the cake, man, because not only do we have misconduct, we've got a cover-up. And it's not the Lawrence County Sheriff this time, though. It's the local police department. Andy, where does this thing start?
Well, it all starts with multiple anonymous employees of the city of Lawrence who have put their careers on the line to expose what they're calling a cover-up seeped in corruption here. And what this report seemingly is doing here is turning on a bright light in a dark room and exposing a bunch of cockroaches here.
Well, walk us through what initiated the cover-up.
Sure. Well, I would say that the whole reason the virus that is myself stuck around with LPD is because they seemingly refused to cough up an incident report for a separate cover-up within the Lawrence County Sheriff's Office that didn't even involve them, which was the domestic violence arrest of a deputy who currently works there, initials JDH, who threatened to effing kill his wife per the incident report that took them 2 months to get to us. All the while, we cut them a check for $30 for 911 calls that they deposited, then said that the 911 calls didn't exist, even though there were 2 different departments that arrived there during the night he was arrested. We've been provided his mugshot, but it's okay. It didn't happen. That's the whole reason we stuck around LPD. And then, come to find out, we've got a totally separate incident unfolding around the same time we FOIA for JDH's incident report. So, about a month ago, we reported on the abrupt resignation of LPD Chief Keith Groundsel, who provided us a comment at that time, assured us that he did not leave under any bad standing or any bad grounds, which was furthermore affirmed by Mayor Nathan Sin at that time, who told us something to the effect of, it came as a surprise to me, I don't really know what happened here, would have loved to have prepared this out a little bit more.
But we wish him all the best.
But we wish him all the best on his future endeavors.
Move along, nothing to see here.
Now, the issue with the statement at that time is we already had multiple employees within county screaming that there was smoke. Mm-hmm. And then over the ensuing weeks, the smoke turned into fire. So it has since become abundantly clear that the chief at that time, Groundsel, appears to have opened an internal affairs investigation into one of his very own subordinates. And while the exact timeline remains unclear, as things were coming to light about this subordinate, whose initials are CJ, who purportedly was effectuating a traffic stop outside of jurisdiction when he was off duty, while intoxicated, purportedly pointed and presented his firearm at a civilian.
Wow.
Now that
What's with these cops in Lawrence, man? Jeez.
I think I saw someone on Twitter say they truly are the busiest.
Yeah.
So that was referred, that incident was referred to the county level LCSO. LCSO then notified LPD. So we have been told. Now, around the same time that this came out about CJ, we have CJ's subordinates who purportedly reached out to their authorities saying that he was falsifying write-ups on them, which is a direct violation of SC Code of Laws, of LPD's Code of Conduct. Thus, the IA investigation was opened.
Yeah, if boozing and pointing your gun at people doesn't get you
Allegedly.
canned, that will get you canned.
Likely
Yes.
will get you canned here.
Yeah.
So, shortly thereafter, the chief abruptly resigns. And we have since been in contact with further employees of the county who state that after that, they were called into a closed-door meeting with the county administrator, Eric Delgado, as well as the mayor, that involved some LPD staff, employees, what have you. And in that meeting, we have Eric Delgado purportedly threatening his very employees of the city, stating that if any of you think you can go behind my back, you're mistaken, dropping explicits throughout these conversations. Yeah. And that was the end of it.
Then we've got this quote, and you'll tell me who. Don't release anything to FITSNews and hope they stop asking questions. Who the heck is this the same guy? This the mayor?
This is a
pulling this move.
This is a series of employees who have been reverberating the same thing, because it's not unknown when FITSNews deploys a FOIA in Lawrence County at this point.
Yeah.
It appears as though there are immediate reactions, whether it's Sheriff Don Reynolds or the chiefs within his county. So this is just what we have been relayed, is that there is a push to withhold information from us. I mean, hell, it took them 2 months to get a domestic violence arrest incident report relating to an LCSO deputy who still works there.
And the crazy thing is, if you just deal with these situations immediately, nip them in the bud, so to speak. I mean, but now they're threatening people with their jobs, denying FOIA requests. I mean, it's not just us. These are public documents. These are the people's
documents paid for by the people. And Lawrence County employees will tell you that very thing, which is why they are threatening their livelihoods to expose, again, that so-called corruption, the cockroaches in the dark room. So what we have here, the series of events that have unfolded in LPD, we FOIA'd for CJ's disciplinary records relating to this internal affairs investigation that was purportedly closed as soon as it happened, prompting a chief to abruptly resign, right?
Nothing suspicious.
Nothing suspicious there. And approximately a week after we deployed that FOIA, which was our second such FOIA directed towards LPD, there is an important departmental-wide meeting hosted by now Chief Heath Copeland, who was captain under Groundsel at that time. Groundsel was chief. So now Heath Copeland has been promoted to chief by Mayor Sin, and he hosts this departmental-wide meeting.
Let me guess, he fired the bad guys and told everybody to come clean.
Wouldn't we love that? Shouldn't that be the case?
I'm guessing that's not what happened.
So, of course, he announced the restructuring of the department, as would be policy for any new chief, right? But we're told that he threatened to charge his officers if they speak to the press for so much as anything department-related. Quote, you can and will be charged.
With what?
That is what they wondered as well as myself. Yeah. I scoured SC Code of Laws. I couldn't find anything he could truly charge them with if they're not jeopardizing an active investigation.
Right.
Which is why I emailed Chief Copeland that the day before you and I sat down for this recording here, and unfortunately he has not gotten back with me as to what he intends to charge his officers with in the event they do reach out to the media. Now,
telling the truth.
For telling the truth. And during that meeting, he purportedly announced the demotion of Officer CJ, which indicates that there should have been some disciplinary files filed against CJ. If he conducted himself in a manner that he did outside of jurisdiction, on top of falsifying write-ups, and was thereafter demoted, there should be disciplinary records. Well, just days after hosting this meeting, in which he threatened to charge his officers, Chief Copeland emailed me in a letter that was printed out, signed by him, scanned in, mayored, CC'd, sent to me saying, there are no such documents related to your FOIA request.
I was about to ask you. I'm sure he emailed you and said, here's all the documents we have.
Again, would that be nice? In theory, that's what we should do.
Andy, let me ask you a root level question. You covered a lot of these departments. You've covered a ton of these stories. You've found smoking guns on numerous different agencies. Shouldn't they have an incentive to, number one, get rid of the bad apples, to get folks off the streets who are allegedly behaving this way? But the transparency side, because again, hoping that FITSNews doesn't ask further questions, that's not your MO, man.
Oh, no.
That's a direct, that's what wakes you up in the morning, is asking further questions.
It's what gets me going. And again, it all goes back to the screamings of fire, all right? Or the screamings of smoke, more so. Because if we've got extremely credible individuals saying that there's smoke, and then that bellows into the colors of flames, then perhaps there's something here. And we've got the left hand evidently not talking to the right hand, because things are conflicting here. And you're right. You ask about, okay, well, maybe they'll go away. No, I referred to myself as a virus, and I will stand by that.
The good kind.
The good kind of virus, right.
Let me ask you another question, or just kind of a root level question, because I think you said it earlier there, talking about the credible sources that you spoke with. You know, obviously it's incredibly disappointing to hear about this sort of institutional misconduct, attempts to cover it up, to evade accountability. But you mentioned it at the very outset, there are folks risking their jobs, their livelihoods at a very difficult time economically to make sure this gets out in the public. So that's something we should encourage, right?
Correct. So in the same breath that we've got folks in Honeypath Police Department or Sullivan's Island Police Department, while they're exposing horrific, negligent misconduct, it takes a good officer to put themselves, their families, their livelihoods, again, on the line in almost support of the other fellow officers doing everything right to expose that corruption, to expose the lies that they're evidently overhearing as I, or FITSNews, makes their requests for public documentation.
Folks, Andy's been doing this in the Low Country, in the Upstate, this one in Lawrence County. Just amazing work, Andy. Keep holding their feet to the fire. Keep asking those questions, and let's make sure that working together, we root out some of these bad apples and get these departments back on the level instead of trying to hide the ball.
Shouldn't be too much to ask.
Shouldn't be.
Shortly after filming this segment of the Weekend Review, City of Lawrence Mayor Nathan Sin issued the following statement in which he and City Administrator Eric Delgado denied any wrongdoing. Lawrence Police Chief Heath Copeland thereafter provided his own statement to FITSNews in which he denied threatening his officers with criminal charges for speaking with reporters.
So now we're back to my favorite part of the show, talking politics. FITSNews, of course, began as a political website, and I love sitting down with people who know their politics. I'm here with Dylan Nolan. I miss these segments, man.
Welcome back.
That's right. Good to be back. Let's talk first with the big event I missed, which was up in Greenville, the Candidate Forum. William Timmons, the incumbent congressman for the 4th District, versus Adam Morgan. You, Andy Fancher, were both there. Who won this thing, Dylan?
Well, I think we should start by saying we were sitting with Ron Rawlis, which, of course, makes everything twice as fun. I think that Adam Morgan was garnering some more applause. And I do think that having been at the State House where he's fighting, on a daily basis, Adam Morgan is pretty much in a pitched battle every day that he's turning up to the State House. I think that he is a little bit more of a well-oiled fighting machine, kind of set up for these kinds of events. William Timmons, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think he had an easier walk into office and doesn't have to do adversarial things like this on a regular basis. So he was a little bit less comfortable on his feet.
Yeah, well, this is his first credible challenge since he won this seat back in 2018. Timmons going for his fourth term up in Washington. Obviously, issues were discussed. Adam Morgan making the case that he would be a more credible, consistent, conservative vote in the U.S. Congress than William Timmons. But the highlight of the afternoon, the question posed to William Timmons about his self-inflicted sex scandal, which again broke exclusively on our media outlet 2 years ago. How did he handle it, Dylan?
It's interesting because he characterized him cheating on his wife as their marriage failing, which would imply, maybe some mutual, we went our separate ways and how we see the world. He leaned heavily on the fact that his wife still supports him, but it was definitely an answer that you could tell that those in the room, keeping in mind that the upstate of South Carolina is an extremely socially conservative place, did not find satisfying.
Well, you got a clip of it here and an attempt to get an answer from him after. Let's take a look at you and Andy trying to get some response from William Timmons after this answer.
Thank you. I did get divorced last year. Sarah has been one of my best friends for 15 years, and she is still one of my best friends. It is extremely sad that our marriage failed, and it's just sad. So I have worked hard to represent the people of the 4th Congressional District. I've gotten results. I vote right. I talked to Sarah this morning. She wanted to be here. She has depositions. She's fully supporting my re-election. She knows my record better than anyone's. So I would say that her continued support of me speaks volumes. Look, it is sad that I'm no longer married, but that's all I got.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it. Thank you for your time. Sorry, guys, I gotta go.
Ready?
Time for everybody else, but not FITSNews. Time for everybody else.
And that's all the time that Representative William Timmons has. Didn't quite have time to catch a question from FITSNews.
Darn.
Got time for everybody else, right?
Got time for everybody
else. No time for Andy Fancher. What the hell?
The interesting thing is Andy and I were standing there prior to approaching William, and we were trying to figure out, okay, what would we like to ask him about? And something that he referenced in the debate, and it was a very benign question answer, was the fact that he sees the national debt as the most important policy issue for them to address going forward, which I think, that's reasonable.
Yeah.
And so that was what I was going to ask him about. So the fact that he went and booked it made it a lot more funny to me.
You were going to give him a softball.
Asking a Republican politician a question about the national debt is about as much of a softball as you're going to get. Andy, on the other hand, I don't know. He might have had a little bit more fun with it, so perhaps William was right to run.
Well, if I were going to ask him about the national debt, I would ask him about the $800,000 plus in taxpayer money that he spent on pretty much campaign advertising.
Well, it was very
since he's been
interesting.
elected.
During the debate, he mentioned his ranking in South Carolina Republican delegation. I think he said he was somewhere in the middle of the pack there as far as all of them are blowing taxpayer money out the butt to send mailers, which I understand. It's pretty expensive. You want to send a mailer to just a House district in South Carolina, it's like $10,000 plus. So to do a whole congressional district, that's got to be a lot of money. So obviously if they can take it out of our pockets and use it to get themselves back in office, they'll do it.
While bragging about their fiscal conservatism. But anyway, if you haven't checked it out, the William Timmons saga, Days of Our Congressman, we called it. This was a story, again, self-started by William Timmons. He sent us an unsolicited statement asking for prayers and privacy 2 years ago. That's what kicked this whole story off about his affair with socialite Paula Dyer. That story blew up in his face. Ron Rawls, you mentioned him earlier. He was a big driving force about that. In fact, I think we're looking now at that pink church we went to where we interviewed Ron Rawls, one of the most surreal interviews we've ever done. But Dylan, as this race moves down to the wire in June, one of several races we're tracking, the 1st district race, the 3rd district race, this one. But let's pivot real quick to the State House. There's an issue you covered earlier this year for us as it was working its way through the legislative process, the issue of gender-affirming care. And I got to be honest, I say that term, I feel my penis shrinking when I say that. That's not what this really is it?
Well, you've certainly had enough kids that might not be a bad thing, for some time here. But yeah, gender-affirming care is, of course, I find that the use of those words very interesting by media outlets because it takes a very opinionated stance to the validity of that care. And there's a growing number of states across the United States and a growing number of nations across the Western world which are prohibiting the use of so-called gender-affirming care for minors. And the reason for that is that most of these procedures or medications are irreversible once you go down that path.
Mm. Well, this bill that passed the Senate by a vote 28-8, I believe it was 27 Republicans, 1 Democrat voted for it, 8 Democrats, or rather 7 independents, or 7 Democrats, 1 independent, I'll get this right at some point, voted against it, 28-8. This bill now heads to the House for concurrence. If they concur, it'll go to Governor McMaster, who will sign it. We would then become the 25th state in America to ban these practices. But Dylan, the language, you mentioned it earlier, does matter because we talk about book banning in our public schools, which is the left's new term for keeping basically porn propaganda out of government-subsidized libraries. This art of language and how we phrase these debates, because you're exactly right. We called it on FITSNews what it is, sex change operations for minors.
Right, it's a neutral term. It doesn't say it's good, it doesn't say it's bad, it just is what it is. It's a sex change surgery performed on a minor.
Yeah. Not gender-affirming healthcare. It's not some necessary healthcare procedure, is it? It's a voluntary.
Well, I mean, if we're going to just be talking about the language, whether it's necessary or not, if you're a news outlet, and I look at news outlets across our state, Post and Courier, the state, most of our local television stations all refer to it as gender-affirming care, which to me, if you're going to purport to be a news outlet and you're not going to be bringing your opinion into it, just call it what it is in a neutral sense.
Well, they went hard to the paint on this bill, doing everything they could to block it. But again, it cleared the state Senate by an overwhelming margin. Let's talk about one other issue that came up. This is one we'll probably get a little love from the left. I don't know. It seems to be universally loved these days, left, right, center, judging from polling that we've exclusively reported on FITSNews, by the way. But the issue of medical marijuana. This is one that has overwhelmingly cleared the state Senate twice now, in 2022 and earlier this year, by overwhelming bipartisan margins. Last time it went to the House, they used a procedural gimmick to rule the bill out of order. Dylan, this time they didn't even take a vote on it.
They didn't even take a vote on it. And you have argued, we were going back and forth in text messages. I got kind of upset last year because I thought that the procedural way that they ruled it out of order was just not consistent with other rulings they had made throughout the years. It just kind of screamed to me that they were targeting it with this rule. To me, them not taking it up on voting on it, they're not obligated to take any issue up that they don't want to.
Oh, fair enough. So you don't think they're as cowardly this time as they were last time?
Definitionally no.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's been a decade-long fight for folks, again, a whole range of individuals in South Carolina. We're talking tens of thousands of people here suffering from all manner of conditions. And again, we're not arguing that medical marijuana is going to cure anything, but again, it is something that folks have relied on for pain management, particularly folks going through chemo, going through some of these really hard.
Folks with Parkinson's, I don't know if, that's probably the best example to me. These people who have lives which otherwise are very hard for me to imagine how you even get out of bed in the morning, shaking so terribly, and it completely calms them down. So yes, I understand. If you're a small government, individual, liberty type person, to oppose people being able to make that choice on their own just seems asinine.
Epilepsy, PTSD. I mean, we got a ton of things that it's proven effective at, again, not necessarily curing, but mitigating some of those effects.
So, you could call us some Republican shills here, but I think that it's time for us to get on our knees if we're going to take this path and thank President Joe Biden's administration.
Oh, here he goes.
That's
Let's
right.
hear it.
The DEA, which has classified, they have a scheduling system for drugs where one would be the most dangerous and it goes down from there. For years, they've had marijuana as a tier 1 drug, class 1. This puts it up there with and above many drugs, which are, objectively
Heroin.
Far more dangerous.
Yeah.
They're going to drop it down to 3. This means that research institutions, medical institutions, are going to have a far easier time obtaining it for use in studies. This doesn't mean that you're going to be able to legally be running around with marijuana yet, but it's a step in that direction. Some people say politically it's an election year move because obviously it's not just in South Carolina that voters largely don't have a problem with marijuana. It's across the country.
It's true. Well, federal politics, state politics, here at FITSNews, we've got you covered on all these big issues, particularly those advancing through, or in this case, not advancing through the South Carolina General Assembly. But again, count on us to keep you posted not only on the policy side of it, but the political angle of it. And again, medical marijuana is something, as we exclusively reported just last month, has huge support across racial divides, across geographic areas of the state, across the partisan divide. I mean, I think the lowest on any of those indicators is in the high 60s, and then most of them you got high 80% support for again decriminalizing medical marijuana. But Dylan, you've been on a lot of these issues. Thanks again for sitting down with me. And again, if you're not following us for the political coverage, you need to start now. FITSNews, starting off strong with the politics. That is a wrap for a jam-packed edition of the Week in Review. Believe it or not, we had a ton of other stories we covered this past week. I cannot credit our crew enough. Jen Wood, Dylan Nolan, Andy Fancher, the whole team, as I was out for much of this past week welcoming a new baby. That's right, my wife and I, our 8th kid. I know, not even Catholic, go figure, right? But our new kid arrived. There's a little glimpse of the little guy. But I want to thank the crew for pulling together this week, keeping the trains moving while I was out as we continued our mission of holding those in power accountable to you. We'll catch you next time on the Week in Review.